And so that has been the issue for me. It's like, oh, we got to do it. I got to have the opportunity to do it. My councilwoman is retiring. So that left another opportunity to take advantage of and try to make a difference in our city. There's so many issues that we still have to work on to help all of us and to make sure that every child has opportunities, every small business owner is able to get the financing that they need. I was the chair of the Baltimore Hispanic Chamber for a while, so I know, what some of the challenges are in our business community. Both citywide and also the Latino business community. And then, I could go on and on about all the issues I want to deal with, but we'll deal with that later. But I think it's important that people know that it's important to step up. This is the most important election of our lifetime, this one right here. And it is important at the national level, but also at the local level, because the local level is where you're seeing things happen today, right? So even if craziness happens in the national level, which we're going to try to avoid, the local level is extremely important so that we can, you can get, the basics taken care of, dealing with illegal dumping, dealing with all of that. And we can see those results, but also really work on a lot of the systemic issues that we have in our city. So I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be among our colleagues. And I have, my whole platform is on the website. We also do town halls every Wednesday night to educate people on what's happening. And this coming Wednesday night, we're doing one about Hispanic Heritage Month and lifting up Latinas, which I'm excited about. So I hope you can join. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Would anyone like to go next?
Oh, I'm supposed to call out who goes next, right? Okay, Delegate Pena Milnick.
I was going to say, let's alternate with our colleague Mel. So I will call on Councilmember Cohen.
Oh, thank you. Gracias. So my name is Zeke. Me llamo Zeke. Soy un concejal del Distrito 1 para Baltimore City Gobierno. I am not Hispanic, and so it is truly an honor to be with you all here today. Though I do consider this to be my community as well. I was thinking about the question. I'm Jewish, and for Jews, I think that we are sort of perpetual immigrants. There's a quote that we say on Passover, which is, "We were strangers too," and it refers to when we made our exodus from Egypt and escaped from bondage and slavery and made it to, wandered in the desert for a long time, and then eventually made it to our promised land. My own family as well is a story of immigration and of exodus. I would not be here were it not for my great-grandmother who escaped from Austria. She was a seamstress, and when Hitler started to take power, it became increasingly clear that this was not going to end well for her or for her family. And so one of my most prized possessions is a letter from my great-grandmother. She wrote to me when I was 1, and in the letter is this tiny gold coin. And at the top of the coin is this tiny little hole where, like I said, she was a seamstress. When Jews were going to leave Europe, the Nazis would confiscate their gold and their money. And what my grandmother did, what my great-grandmother did, is she sewed all of her coins into her dresses. And so in this letter is this tiny little coin from my great-grandmother who managed to leave. And I should say, she was the only one who made it out. The rest of her family and most of my family was exterminated in concentration camps. Fortunately, thanking God, she came to the United States. She came to New York. She was able to emigrate and didn't speak any English, came to Brooklyn, New York, and raised a family. And but for her courage and her perseverance and wherewithal to come to these United States, her great-grandson would not be serving in the Baltimore City Council. And so I see it as incumbent on me to honor my great-grandma's legacy by being an advocate, an ally, and at times an accomplice to our immigrant community, particularly to our Hispanic community. And I will say this has been the most vicious, racist, xenophobic administration that I think we've had in well over 100 years in this country. The implications of having a president who is openly hostile to immigrants, who delights in, and I don't use this word lightly, but really terrorizing our community, has just been incredibly challenging. Angelo will remember really early on in my tenure, we had 2 men get picked up by ICE outside of Walgreens when they were going to get their medicine. And then about a week later, we had a father drop off his 9-year-old child at Hampstead Hill Academy and then get picked up at ICE in broad daylight in front of everyone, was detained and then ultimately deported to Honduras. And just the amount of trauma and terror that that caused within the community was profound. People stopped showing up to school. People stopped calling law enforcement when there was a crime. It just created this absolute chilling effect for our Hispanic community. And I was really proud at the time in working with Angelo and Franca and her students and Casa de Maryland and all the organizations to sponsor a welcoming resolution reaffirming our city's commitment to be welcoming and to not collaborate with ICE in any way, shape, or form. Because we see ICE and the deportation tactics they've used as being really antithetical to public safety. So I would just say, ours is an incredible community, incredible Hispanic community. About a year ago today, Angelo led the Parade of Latin Nations, and it was one of the most beautiful showings I've ever seen. People from all over the world coming together to celebrate each other's culture. I expect that's what we'll see tomorrow as well. But just to close for me, what is so special about my district and really about our city and our state is its vibrant diversity. And there is no more diverse and vibrant of a community than our Hispanic community. So again, it's a great, great honor and a pleasure to be with you all today. And I will pass it back to Delegate Pena Melnick.
What an amazing, impressive, inspiring story. And your grandmother, what a beautiful woman, what a role model. You know, we are all shaped by our loved ones, right? Who surround people that we grow up with. I want to first say thank you for allowing me to be on this wonderful panel. I love Odette, that's my sister from another mother. And we've been there for each other. And it's important to support each other, you know, when we run, and especially, no offense to the men, for women, to be supportive of each other. So thank you for having me. I actually came to this beautiful country, and I say beautiful country because it is a beautiful country, because I wouldn't be where I am if it were not for the opportunities that I had in this country. I came from the Dominican Republic with my mother, and we actually ended up living in New York City. So anyone that is familiar with Washington Heights, I grew up in Washington Heights. I went to school in the Bronx, you know, as well, to high school. So I'm a New York girl, but I have been in Maryland now since, my God, like the early 90s. So more than 30 something years. So I love Maryland as well. I'm a proud US citizen. So, you know, but I have both cultures, and who I am is because of my culture as well, my value system. My mom didn't even study to the 3rd grade, but she always said that education was important. And my sister and I, you know, we lived with her in New York City. We lived when we first came here in someone's home in a bedroom, and then we rented a room in someone's apartment. Then we had a little studio. My mom worked in a factory, many factories, you know, and we'll get 15 minutes to eat. She will call and say, hey, empieza el arroz, empieza la habichuela, can you start the rice, start the beans, you know, as she was on the train, on the metro, coming home. That is my background. And no one in my immediate family had ever gone to college. You know, my sister had a baby when she was 16, and I knew I wanted to go to college and that I wanted to help my family. You know, I will go to the welfare office. I remember, and my mom, when I was 8, would volunteer me to translate for everyone that was at the welfare office with my little English, the little English that I knew. So I had no business knowing people's business, that kind of business at 8 years old. But it kind of shaped who I am. And I knew I wanted to get an education, and I wanted to help my mom and my sister. So I told my guidance counselor, I want to go to college. And she was like, where do you want to go? I said, anywhere, but not that is far away from New York City, right? So, and I love New York City, but a lot of my friends were having babies, and I just wanted to go away. And I ended up this island girl in Buffalo, New York. And I did not notice snow so much in Buffalo, New York. I arrived there, the blizzard of 85. And for this island girl, that was hell. But it was exactly where I needed to be to stay focused. So I ended up going to college and then going to law school. I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. My mom would call me la abogadita, the little lawyer, because I could never stay quiet. I gave her a hard time. Now, when my kids do that, I go, karma, you know, karma is real, because I could not stay quiet. And I ended up, you know, graduating from law school and becoming a public defender. Then later on, I worked with Eric Holder at the U.S. Attorney's Office as a prosecutor as well. I done both. I never thought I would run for office, honest to God. And after staying home and having our babies, I have 3 kids, a boy who's now 21, he's in his last year of college, and at Maryland, and a girl, I have twins, a girl who's at Maryland, who's a junior, and then I have another girl twin who's at Yale University. You know, for me to have the life I have today, I'm not rich, I'm middle class like everyone else. I drive a car with 200,000 miles, right? But we make choices in life so that we can be flexible. And I ended up staying home when we had our kids. It was my choice. I wanted to be home, and then I couldn't be just home. And I started getting involved like Odette in the community, being on this board. I was on Casa de Maryland on the board for 4 years. You know, I was on the local city council in College Park as well. And I never thought I would run for the state, but then the woman that held this seat, Pauline Menace, was there for 39 years. At that point, she was the longest serving, you know, woman in the General Assembly. And I said, I want to run. And I went to the senator and the 2 delegates, right? We have 47 districts in Maryland, 188 people altogether in the General Assembly, 141 delegates in the House, 47 senators in the Senate. And you run on slates, right? It's a lot cheaper when you do your signs, your mailings. So I said, I went to the slate and I said, I'd like to run with you. And they were like, no. So I said, but your ticket is all white. You know, where our district is changing, I bring diversity. Not only do I bring diversity, but I'm a, you know, Black Latina, I speak Spanish, I'm a lawyer, I'm qualified, you know, a woman. So I decided, I went to my husband, and I tell young ladies this, no offense to the men, your partner either makes you or breaks you. So I went to my husband and I said, I'm not asking you for permission, but I'm taking some of our money, but I like to have you be part of my team, and I'm running for office, and for higher office. And he was like, he's my biggest cheerleader. He was like, go ahead, babe. And my husband, by the way, you know, is actually Ukrainian. And his father was picked up from the Germans when he was 14 on his way home and never saw his family again, and ended up in a labor camp because, you know, he was Ukrainian and learned German and was a translator. And it's a long story how they ended up here, but I can relate to you. Our immigrant story is similar. So basically, he said, yes, my kids and I and my friends from all over the world help me. We door knock on more than 10,000 doors. It's tough to run when you're not on a team, right? On a slate. People won't endorse you. They won't write checks, and it takes money. So we door knock on more than 10,000 doors, more than 8,000 phone calls, more than 7 mailings. I have my kids who were young at that point, 5 and 6, at the corners at 5:30 sign waving. I thought I was gonna be like reported to social services. And we had 125 poll workers on election days to cover my 30-something polls. There were 9 of us running, 2 tickets, and me in the middle by myself for this seat. And I came in second, almost first. I've been there 14 years. The 4-year terms, I'm one of 4 Latinas out of 188, only 4. When you think about our population, that's really disappointing. You know, in 2010, the Latino population was more than 500,000. Now, you know, we're more than that. We're more than 10% of the population. And our voice is important. While I have been in the General Assembly, I don't just represent Latinos, I represent everyone, right? But you bring a unique experience that you must speak when you're in a room. So I have worked hard on the DREAM Act, which I was instrumental in helping that get through. I worked on the driver's license for undocumented as well. We got it through. And I have been introducing every year the Trust Act, okay? Because we need the community to feel comfortable. We shouldn't be enforcing federal law. I am the vice chair of the Health Committee for the House, and I am actually the chair of the Public Health and Minority Disparities Committee. So I have focused on reducing the number of uninsured in the state of Maryland. So I put in a bill that brought in $1.3 billion to actually stabilize the individual insurance market. So we created a reinsurance program. I put in a bill, when you did your taxes, you see that little box that says, do you have insurance? And if not, may we refer you to the Maryland Health Exchange? That was my baby. And the bill that actually is the first in the nation to create a drug affordability board, it was my baby as well. So I have been, you know, really active in the legislature. If you think you can make a difference, you're mistaken. We immigrants can make a difference. We're making a difference. We care about this country. We care about our families. We need more of us in office. You know, we contribute a lot, undocumented people. Last year, our community of undocumented paid over $139 million to the state of Maryland in taxes, because even though they don't have a social security number, many TPS holders and dreamers have a worker's permit, and they work, and they were not able to file for unemployment. They were not able to get a stimulus check either. So they don't have a lot of resources. They are suffering, and we need to be present. I urge people to run for office. You can make a difference. If this island girl can make a difference in a humble way, you know, so can you. And we're going to do it. And we're part of this fabric. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be part of this panel. And I now would turn it over to Mr. Angelo Solera. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, I believe it's Franca's turn right now. You gotta unmute yourself, Franca.
Okay.
Hi,
Thank
everybody. Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about how important it is for our community to lift their voice. My name is Franca Miller-Paz. I am a teacher at Baltimore City College High School here in the city. I've been teaching for 10 years, and I'm running for city council in the 12th district. And so thank you, everybody, for sharing these incredible stories. You got me ready to cry over here. And apologies for the scenery. We've been knocking doors all day, so we're in the mobile office right now. But yeah, so I'm so excited to be here, and I also immigrated here. I came here as a really young child. I immigrated together with my mother to meet with my father, both of whom are from Peru. We fled Peru because there was some very intense political violence that was taking place in our country, and it was really time for my mother needed to leave. And so we came to the United States and joined with my father and moved to not too far from Washington Heights, but across the river to Paterson, New Jersey. um, and came to New Jersey and started to try to build our lives there. And you know, it was an incredible experience to come to the United States, but my parents are really concerned. We lived in Paterson, which is very similar to Baltimore. I say it's like a little mini Baltimore. It's a factory town where a lot of the factories have left. And so my parents were really concerned about the schooling and what they were hearing about what was going on in the schools, the lack of resources, worried about my ability to walk to school and walk home and be safe. There had been a lot of issues of drug-related violence happening where we were living. And so my parents made a really tough decision, which was to try to move to a neighborhood that was just a couple miles away, but that meant that I'd be able to attend a public school that they felt would really give me the opportunities that I needed. But that came with a lot of sacrifice. It meant that my parents were working double shifts, helping with construction and, you know, dangerous work. My father once almost went blind in one eye from the work that he was doing, and all of which with no insurance. You know, I grew up almost never going to the doctor. I knew, and this is even hard as me for an adult today, you know, unless I feel like I'm about to die, I feel like you don't go to the doctor, which is not safe and not okay. And I don't recommend that for everyone. We should all be able to take care of our health. But it was really tough. We didn't have that to fall back on. And it also meant that I almost never saw my father. He would leave for work before I woke up. And by the time I'd gone to bed, he was still out working his next shift. And that was the sacrifice that he made so that I could go to a decent public school. And I really thank him and my mother so much for the work that they did, because I often question, you know, would I've gone, I came here to Maryland to study. I came to Goucher College with the help of a lot of community service scholarships and work like that. And so I really thank them for the hard work that they did to give me the chance to be able to get into a school like Goucher and be able to become the first person in my family to go and graduate from college. And from there, I actually taught after school programs at Zeke's school when he was a teacher. I was teaching poetry first at George Kelson over in Sandtown, Winchester, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. And also then taught at Curtis Bay Elementary Middle School. And I just fell in love with teaching and really was inspired by the voice of our young people and how powerful their experiences are, and wanted to have a role in really being able to help lift up their voice. And so I went into teaching, have tried to organize workers, worked to try to unionize the school I was teaching in when I briefly taught in Philadelphia, while I was also pursuing my master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania, but came back to Baltimore as soon as I could so that I could teach at an incredible school, which is Baltimore City College. So for everybody there from City forever. So love for all the schools, of course, across Baltimore. And it's been, you know, exciting to get to work with young people. I work with SOMO, Students Organizing a Multicultural Open Society. They are incredible leaders in our community that have been pushing the envelope, trying to fight for all students across the city, have been more recently fighting around digital access, helped to win $3 million from our youth fund in the city to go towards closing the digital divide, have been putting the heat on and the pressure on Comcast so that they will be an actual good corporate partner in this city and do what's necessary so that our kids can get the education they need. And they've also been fighting for educational opportunity. Something that we noticed was going on in our city was that unfortunately, students that were in English as a second language programming or ESOL really weren't being represented in the district's highly selective schools, be that Dunbar, Poly, Western, City College. And, we thought that there was something deeply problematic about that. Why weren't we seeing our immigrant students represented across our schools, especially when the population of immigrant students is growing? City schools is really suffering from actually a loss of population of students. And it is our vibrant, incredible immigrant community that is keeping our school system financially afloat and making sure that we have the amount of students that we need to be able to really get the funding that we need in our schools. And so to see them not be represented in these schools, I found was deeply troubling. And what we realized is that there wasn't a part of the formula for how you get in that was really excluding our kids, and it was the standardized test. They were being asked to show their math skills, their critical thinking skills, their ability around reading comprehension, and perhaps a language that they had only been speaking for a few months or a couple years. And so obviously they could be brilliant, incredibly capable students, but if you're asking them to do something in a language they're just starting to learn, they're not going to be able to show off how amazing they are. And so we had an incredible victory this past winter in, I think, February, March of 2020. And we successfully secured that now students that have been in ESOL for 3 years or have been in this country for 3 years or less can have the support of a translator when they take and can retake a new exam for their standardized test component with the help of a translator, so they can really show what they're capable of. And this is, of course, incredible for our Spanish-speaking students, for students whether they speak Arabic, Farsi, Chinese, doesn't matter. They have the ability to request a translator while they take that test and make sure our students get the opportunity. And so it's been amazing to work with these young people. We also have students who through my classroom have started essentially their own almost nonprofit, which is called Intercambio, in which students took on the issue of illiteracy, English illiteracy in our community in the Southeast. There is a tremendous problem actually across our city when it comes to adult illiteracy, but particularly in our Spanish-speaking community when it comes to English literacy. And so they started a program which they have received grant funding every year that they apply for, they write for. They wrote the whole program, totally student-led, where they have English-speaking students teaching English to our Spanish-speaking community members. Then our Spanish-speaking community members support our students that are learning Spanish with their Spanish skills, doing this incredible exchange called Intercambio. And so this is their 4th year, and they are even brought the program on digitally. So get excited. They're going to be starting November 1st. And you'll be able to learn online, whether you want to learn English, so you can be, an active part of your community, or maybe you support the Spanish-speaking community and you need to improve your Spanish. So Zeke, if you want to work on those skills, you can join Intercambio. But I love my work as a teacher, and we've been really trying to push for a lot of efforts. And so now we're trying to take the fight that we've been leading from the streets up to City Hall and trying to bring in another champion for education into the City Council. But thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
Franca, did you say you went to Goucher?
I did.
Oh my God, we've got 3 Goucher people here. Zeke went to
so.
Goucher as well. I went to
Small
Goucher.
world.
Oh my God.
Yeah, go for pride all day.
That is so awesome. Oh
As
my
you
God,
can
that's
see,
so
we are related more than one way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And also just want to say City College, District 14 right here. So Franca, I'd love to meet some of your students.
Absolutely. And Mary Pat has been a huge, huge advocate. So we're excited to work with you, Odette, and continue the work of making sure that, the Castle on the Hill continues to do all this incredible work along with politics and young people, because
awesome.
As I recently heard from one of the activists from Good Kids Mad City, Destiny, another City College grad, if a lot of people talk about youth being the future. They're the present. They are the change right now. That we don't need to wait for them to be getting into making our communities better and stronger. They're doing that work this very moment. So, but yeah, absolutely, Odette.
Mm. That's actually a beautiful segue into one of the questions I wanted to bring to this discussion around real and perceived barriers to civic engagement, whether that's, you know, taking on a leadership position or being able to vote. There's obviously a larger conversation around citizenship, especially within the Latinx community. But I was wondering if maybe we can use the rest of the time together to kind of debunk any of the barriers that may be floating around, and maybe also connect people to resources that can help further that process.
In terms of voting, you mean? So there's a couple of things. I mean, there's actually some municipalities in delegate, maybe in your district, but certainly in your area, that have voted to allow for people who are non-citizens to vote in their local elections. And that is something I'm looking into for Baltimore, frankly. That they wouldn't be able to vote for president and the state, but they could vote for local municipal. And so that I think will be helpful to really galvanize people to really be involved in our politics today, and probably increase our voter turnout too, because it's like we don't have, you know. So I think that that's important. But for those people who can vote, for Latinos who can vote, it's important to do so. And it's unfortunate that our governor has engaged in voter suppression. He has decided to make this election very confusing. So it's hard for people to vote. So instead of sending out ballots that everybody got in June, you have to request your ballot. And so you can call the Board of Elections, 410-396-1444, or you got something in the mail, you can fill out and send it back in. And then there will be drop boxes all over the city to be able to drop off your ballot. And then there will be limited in-person voting. So your polling place that you normally go to, likely not open. So you just need to, there's plenty of information on my website. I'm sure Councilman Cohen and all of our colleagues here have information about where to vote in their districts. It's just, you have to actually make a conscious plan. You can't just wake up on election day and go, I'm going to go down the street. No, it's not going to be that easy. So fill out your, get your absentee, your mail-in ballot, drop it off in a drop box, or vote in person. There will be early voting this time, also from October 26th all the way to election day. And there'll only be 8 sites that are open. And I think the councilman talked about where they are in Baltimore City, and Franca could as well in her district. In mine, we don't have an early voting site, but we have one in-person voting site on election day. That's the Reach Partnership School. But we have several that are very close by: Morgan University, Berkeley School, ACE Academy. And then your drop-off spots, I have 3 in the 14th district as well. We'll get the word out about that. But it's just, you have to make a conscious effort this time to vote. And so just be aware of that. We'll be get the word out. And then also look into this idea of empowering more people to vote by allowing more people to be able to vote at the municipal level, which some of our colleagues have done in other parts of the state.
So in Maryland, we have 11 cities that allow citizens to vote. And Hyattsville, Tacoma Park, College Park are among them. Mount Rainier, right? Very progressive, diverse, inclusive cities. I would say that for this election, I have seen, I'm making calls that people are interested, and there's a lot of misinformation out there that is actually, put out there to create fear among our communities. I have seen the opposite. People want to vote. They are calling me, can I have a sign? Do you have a sign, a bumper sticker? Our communities are involved, and there are many opportunities. So in Maryland, we start early voting on October 26th until November 2nd, from 7 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. And then you have the actual voting date of November 3rd, from 7 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. Because of COVID-19, the facilities that are being used for voting are large places to allow for social distancing. The list of those places are on the Maryland Board of Election, but you also will get something at home mail, where you can vote. In Maryland, and I'm very proud to say that I actually voted for it, we allow same day registration and voting. So if you're not able to register by by October 13th, which is a deadline to vote to register, right, by mail, you can do it in person. You could do it during early voting, October 26th to November 2nd. And guess what? If you forgot, you could do it on November 3rd as well. So there's no excuse. If you're not comfortable voting by mail, which by the way is pretty safe, during the primary election, 97% of the people that voted in Maryland during the primary election in June were by mail, 97%. So the reason why Hogan, excuse me?
I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why Hogan decided not to mail the ballot directly right now, he basically allowed for if you want to vote, you have to apply, as Odette said, for the application for the ballot. Once you ask for the application, it comes to you, you fill it out, you mail it, right? Then they review it and they send you the ballot, then you mail it, all these steps, instead of just sending the ballot directly, which actually worked during the primary. It worked, 97% voted. So you can trust it. But if you don't trust it and you request a ballot, then you can take it to one of those boxes, right? Or you can go in person, put on your mask, and quickly go in and do it. There's no excuse. This is such an important election, especially for our communities of color, our Black and Brown communities. I feel that not just is it our life is really on the ballot, but our dignity is on the ballot. And if you don't vote, guess what? You are allowing someone else to be your voice. Mm-hmm. And you'll be silent. And there's too much at stake. So you can vote. It is important, very important.
Yeah, I would also just stress the importance that, once the election happens, once the ballots are cast, that is not when democratic participation ends, right? That's really when it picks up. The importance of engaging and holding each other and our communities and holding us as elected officials accountable goes beyond the election. Just briefly, I want to say, I hope that folks are starting to see the quiet scheme to take over the city council with all Goucher Gophers, which has been in the works for at least 4 years now, but will continue. Don't tell anyone outside of this Zoom, but it's coming. Also, Delegate, my dad grew up in Washington Heights as well, Orthodox Jewish part, but that's a small world. But yeah, I would just say that, look, I think that, and Angelo had kind of started with talking about how not enough of our Latino, Latinx community votes. I think there's some reasons for that. And one is that I think we have failed as elected officials to do enough to proactively reach out and engage that community, right? If people don't see themselves as part of the electorate, whether they are full citizens or not, then they're not going to participate. And when you go to run for office and you get this big list, and it's called the VAN, the Voter Access Network, what it has is what are called super voters. And those are the people that have voted in the last either 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 elections, right? And that list skews whiter and wealthier and more English speaking than the median population. It's really a list of folks who have had the privilege and the power to be able to vote and to be considered full citizens. And so you get this list, and it's remarkable how it does not match the demographics of the community you represent, or at least the community that I represent. And so it takes an explicit, proactive commitment to reach out and identify who are community leaders, who are folks who aren't on the van, but still need to be part of this civic conversation of how we move forward as one city or one state. And then once the election is over, what we see a lot is, particularly for Black and Brown folks, but I want to talk specifically about our Hispanic community, is that they get really marginalized in a lot of community association conversations, right? Like a lot of times where the rubber meets the road, when neighborhoods are making decisions on zoning or on whether to include affordable housing or any of these major community decisions, public safety, right? You go into that space and 90-something% of the folks in the room are white. And you look around and you're like, wait a minute, I'm in Highlandtown. This community isn't 90-something% white. It's not even close. It's actually majority Hispanic. And yet that community has not been invited in. And I think to the question, there's a couple of reasons for that, a couple of barriers. One is just language access, right? It is incumbent to provide translation, to be working to build folks' English language skills, but also to do things bilingually, because we're an increasingly global and diverse community, and to not at least have a passable Spanish, which I hope I have at least a passable Spanish. It's a work in progress, and I do look forward to learning from Franca students, but it's just not acceptable, right? Like we all need to be learning from each other. Two is childcare, right? We know that it's an enormous burden, and to ask someone to take 2 hours out of their night and show up at a community association, if you don't have childcare, if you haven't provided food, if you haven't thought through that that may be a need for folks, again, is not acceptable. And then three, and finally, there's this thing about community associations where it's just, it tends to be people who know each other. It's more homeowners, it's less catering to folks who rent. And so it just can have this like exclusive vibe to it. And so we were really proud in our district when a group of Latina women got together and created El Comité, which remains almost exclusively Latina women. But it is an amalgamation of Hispanic women from Southeast Baltimore, from Upper Fells Point and Highlandtown and Graceland Park and Greektown. And they are a normal, wonderful community association. And they do all the community cleanups and the talks about public safety and everything else. But it's a space where their voice truly gets through. And they don't have to ask permission. They don't have to feel awkward, right? Like I have to, as their representative, come to them. And I have to brush up on my Spanish when I come in there. Even if it's not so good, I better come in at least attempting to speak Spanish. And so I think so much of it is about not just the ballot and the election itself, but how do we build power after an election happens? How do we, as elected officials, support immigrant communities and make sure they are constantly a voice at the table? For my district, making sure we have a Hispanic liaison that is constantly checking in with folks and that's letting us know if we're missing something. But that's part of why I'm so very excited to have Odette joining us and potentially Franca as well, because this panel is so important because representation really does matter. And it should be more than just a Jewish wannabe Hispanic representative. It should be all the different ethnicities, languages, and groups coming together. So that's why I'm excited for you all to come join us in the City Council.
Thank you so much for that.
Can I add just one other thing? I think the councilman, I think you hit it right on the head in terms of empowerment isn't just voting, but it's also all the other things. I too have to brush up on my Spanish. This was my agreement with Angelo, and so I'm working on it. And it's extremely important. So thank you for bringing that up. And again, I think it's probably, also understanding and making connections between populations about what is important. So like Franca talked a lot about the education issues, and some of the things that her students are dealing with are also what African Americans and other immigrants are working through. And so sometimes it's helpful from a coalition building perspective, right? Because we have to work together on these issues and build coalitions. When I ran the first time in Franca's district, it was difficult. And I think now that people are actually seeing, oh my God, children are being ripped from their families' arms, and but that also happened to us way back when. And like that, this is the thing that we have to concentrate on, is to really build coalition based on the common issues that we have. It's important to address our issues as Latinos, but also making sure that we're building partnership and coalition, because there's so many things that we can be working on together. And lifting those voices is extremely important. So there's so many issues that we all have, Black and brown people have, that we have to work together in order to forward those issues. And be clear that, in terms of my district, my current district, I have very few, I've got maybe like 1,000 Latinos in my district, maybe a little more. But that's important because it's growing. It's growing. The other thing I will say is that, Puerto Ricans overthrew, did a coup and overthrew their governor. This was like last year, right? So we should probably take some tips from them as well, because we might have to do the same. But also understanding that there is this history of rebellion, revolt in Latino communities, and to really build on that excitement about how to make sure that our governors and holding us accountable as well, but making sure that we're lifting up that history as well.
Talking to members of the Latino community who are US citizens, sometimes I ask them, are you voting or are you a voter? And they say no. And I say, why is that? And what it is they look at government and they don't see themselves represented in government. They look at Baltimore City government, they look black and white, and they say, ain't nobody look like me there. Why am I going to vote? When I talked to some members of the Latino community about supporting Odette Ramos, they asked me like, is she Latina? Or what is she? She's white or this or that. And I say to them, look, we need to understand that it's important for us as Latinos to get involved politically and to have political representation in city government, because that's really, I believe, the only way that we're really going to create changes. So one of the problems is Latinos don't vote because they don't believe in the system. They don't see themselves represented. I myself vote because I think I have a responsibility as a Latino and as a human being to speak for those who don't have a vote. There are many in our community who don't have a vote, who I know, personally, I know that their voices are not being heard. So I have to go there and vote as a Latino and tell my Latino friends, you need to vote, because our vote counts even more than regular people, because our vote represents people who cannot vote. So make sure that we understand that as we're looking at the importance of voting and trying to share that with the community, because it takes all of us to really make it happen. And now I am so thankful and grateful that we have finally Latino representation in city government. And don't get me wrong, what SIC does is awesome, but it's seeing somebody like you there in city government. It really gives you hope that maybe now we can be part of this system that in the past they always say, justice for all and equality, but we know that's not reality. And if we have no political representation, we have no voice. And that's why I'm agreed to do this, because I think it's tremendously important to have this conversation and to educate our community. I'm an educator myself, trust me. I didn't go to college, I don't teach, but part of my work in the community is educating the community about the importance of American life, American culture, the importance of voting and things like that. Because a lot of people still think back home. And being an immigrant, all of you are immigrants, we have to, it takes generations to readjust and to get used to the American culture. And we never really 100% American anyway. So, you know, it's all of that. And our role as leaders is to educate our community so our community can become part of the system.
And I would just love to add, because there are so many of our brothers and sisters and neighbors and, you know, members of our community who are undocumented. And I think it's important to realize that that does not mean that you're not welcome in the political process, right? All of us can go out and raise our voice about issues that are happening. All of us can, you know, call Zeke's office and Odette's office when she gets in as well, and say, hey, you know, this is happening in my neighborhood and something needs to change. All of us can send letters to Larry Hogan and the delegates. It doesn't mean you don't have to have, you don't need to be documented or have your citizenship or even have a green card or be a resident to do that. We all have the ability to change politics in our city. And if you're excited about a candidate or something like that, you know, you can still, you can knock on doors, you can talk to people. We all live in mixed communities of mixed immigration status. And so you have the ability to convince your friends, the ability to convince your neighbors, to convince your parents, whether it's a local election, whether it's the presidential election or something happening at the state level. There is absolutely a place for everyone to be in a part of the political process. And it might look a little different, but it's really important to remember that our voices matter and that when our voices are unified, we have the voice of a giant, right? And so it's really important. And I want to tie that back to the comment you made, Odette, about the importance of Black and Brown solidarity. The more that our communities are fractured, the more that we allow the status quo to remain, and for the powers that have been really, you know, oppressing Black and Brown communities, working class communities to continue to be in power. And so it's so important for us to see these points of connection, how our fights and our struggle are really so similar. And when we begin to fight together for the issues that matter for, you know, our families and for our neighbors, we can really win the things that we need. So everyone has a place, but we need to be united.
Do you have any questions that you wanted to pose to the panelists? I know that we had planned to go until 3, so I want to be mindful of people's time.
I guess now that we have a Latina in City Council, and SIC has already been advocating for the Latino community, but Odette Ramos' door is going to be knocked often because now the community is going to come to your door and say, okay, what about this? How do you feel about that, I guess, extra responsibility that now you are having because you are the only one and the first one? So I can imagine it's got to be something in your mind right now thinking about, okay, how am I going to manage this? So I would be curious to know, how are you thinking about it, and what's the process?
Sure. Well, first, again, it's an honor to represent my district and also to be available to fight hard for Latinos and Latinas all over the city. And you know, my plan is I am working on my Spanish, but I also plan on hiring somebody in the office who's got a little bit better Spanish than me, so that we can make sure that we're helping as much as possible. But also working with the Councilman Cohen, Councilman Schleifer, and a few others that have significant Latinos in their district to get the right dynamic. I'm not their councilwoman, but I still will represent them in major issues. So we'll talk about how that dynamic will work, because obviously Councilman Cohen is the councilman there. So and I think that's important that we have that. But also my door is open to anybody. If you need assistance with whatever it is, I'm happy to help out. If I need to refer to my colleagues, and that's fine too. But also, I'm really looking forward to taking on some really big issues for our community. Franca talked about some of the things that we need to address, particularly in education, and work with the Councilman Cohen, who's our big education advocate. My expertise on housing. Let me just tell you how the eviction crisis is going to impact our community. Big time, right? We need more rental assistance for our community. We need more assistance for our community, because people, once they get evicted, they're going to live together. And then that's going to affect making sure, they're going to get sick because of COVID. So that is a big deal. And I'm looking at ways that we can address this, for our community, but citywide. But the disparities that we're seeing in our community have a lot to do with the housing crisis and rental crisis that we had even before COVID, by the way, and now exacerbated by COVID. So I think that my expertise in housing and rental housing and working on some of those issues will help our community as well. So I think the other piece of that is bringing in my expertise on these kinds of things to really help our community as well. So it's there's a lot to really look to, and I look forward to working with Councilman Cohen and potentially Franca in whatever role that she ends up with. But and I know that she's working really hard to take on this role, and I appreciate that, because we're all very hard workers. So I'm excited about that. But also really any of my colleagues, because we do have significant issues in our community. We've got the Title IV issues in terms of the funding for education in our communities. We've got so much that we need to address. I'm looking forward to doing that, and working with Comité Latino and Centro Sol and so many, and Nuestros Raíces, and to come up maybe with an agenda that we can all work on together, and move some things forward. The other piece is, of course, the welcoming city piece. We may also have to designate sanctuary sites. We can't really say that we're a sanctuary city because the mayor has to do that, but maybe we can say ICE can't be anywhere near a school. ICE can't even be anywhere near a church. ICE can't even be anywhere near certain places. And I think the councilman's already started to think about this. So working together on a common agenda for our community is going to be important, but also, again, bringing in expertise. And the other thing, it's important to me that, little girls are looking at us and saying, wow, I can maybe do that too, and so that is important, because, the councilwoman who I'm replacing, Councilwoman Clark, she set the bar high for public service. That is important. That's important to strive for, and she was always, she still is always responsive, very committed to the community, and no scandals, zero. And so it's important to maintain that level of high bar of integrity, just to serve the best that I can, but B, to make sure that as a role model, that I understand that we have to put our best foot forward, and make sure that people know. And the other thing is bringing people with me. It's important as a woman that I work to make sure that we bring more women into the political process. That is really important. As a matter of fact, my daughter, who's 8 years old, she saw a palm card that I have with all of our elected officials on it, even our congressional delegation, which, by the way, we have no women in our congressional delegation. And she said, Mom, there's only 2 women here. And I said, yeah, that's a problem. She goes, yeah, that's a problem. And so, so it's an important role that we all play. And as public officials in particular, making sure that we're of high integrity and making sure that we're setting the example for those who come after us, and bringing people along. That is the most important, is to build that bench. and make sure that we've got more people coming behind us and who can do better than we can. That is the other thing, is that I hope to fix everything in my district in a few amount of years, but I may not be able to. And so working with our colleagues to be able to change the major things that we have in our city, and working is to set good examples and bring people with us, is particularly women in my case, and Latinas. That's important to me.
Yeah, and I would just say there's no one in the city council who was more committed to bringing young folks along than Mary Pat Clark. She was truly an institution, and I don't tell this story much, but very, very early on, I went to her. She had been chair of the Education and Youth Committee, and I went to her and said, like, hey, Councilwoman Clark, I know a ton about you, and you're like my role model. I've looked up to you for a really long time. You don't know who I am, but would love to serve in your committee, and maybe at some point even be vice chair. And she was like, no, you need to be the chairman. You were a teacher. You did the nonprofit. Nah, you get to be the chair. I was like, what? Like, who does that? Like, who has the grace and just like who does that? It really, like, to give power. That truly is who Mary Pat is, and I know that both Odette and Franca have seen. This is also a woman who just continues to learn and never sort of takes it for granted. I mean, just watching what Mary Pat's been able to do in support of Franca's students. Franca had talked earlier about some of the changes within the school system for our immigrant students, really opening up for more selective high schools. Mary Pat played such a big role in that. But I just agree with Odette that the importance of each of us bringing each other up, I think, is so critically important. And I gotta say, I am really, really, really thrilled to have Odette joining us, not just as potentially the first Latina woman, but also her expertise in affordable housing as we face both a national and local eviction crisis. Just horrific job, and I have to say this, that our governor has done in supporting real affordable housing. So little has been allocated, so little has been thought through. We've really been left as cities, as municipalities, to scramble amidst this horrific virus. And so I'm pumped to have her on the council. And I would also just say, as someone who has been a Franca friend and fan for a long time, do not count her out. It's tough to unseat a Democratic incumbent, but I'm telling y'all, if there is one person who could do it, you may be looking at her. So.
We would like to have 2 Latinas on city council. Let me tell you, I would love that. I would be a happy camper, I tell you.
You can do it, Franca. You could do it. When I remember when I ran, there was an incumbent that was there for 9 years, and he lost, and I got in. So it's definitely doable. You're working hard, and I can tell by you being in that car as you're, we're multitasking. You saw my name across the screen because I had to go take another Zoom call quickly. Thank you so much. And you're door knocking, and that's what it's going to take, is a door knocking, constantly leaving it all out there, and you're doing it, and your story moves people. I mean, you're gonna do it. We're gonna claim it for you.
I have a question for Zeke. Lately, you've been advocating for the Latino community in Baltimore City, and we know historically Baltimore City has been a black and white city, a very segregated city. And in the last few years, you've been advocating for the Latino community, and now we have Odette Ramos coming in and doing the same thing. What is the feeling in city council and city government about this new neighbor moving in and start saying, hello, we are here too, we are part of the city, and how things are changing? And what is the feeling of maybe the other councilmen about what is really going on within the Latino community and this movement of having representation and having the city to be more diverse and having the city more representative of the citizens that they serve?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the profound ironies of being in city council in this moment with a president who is so hostile and hateful toward our Latino brothers, sisters, and siblings is in Baltimore. It's just the opposite of everything this president says, right? The Latino community, especially, and Angelo, you know this better than anyone else here, in my district, basically saved my district by moving in at a time when, whether it was Juan Carlos or you, that first wave, the restaurant owners, the folks that, while white Baltimore was moving out, and in parts Black Baltimore was moving out, the Hispanic community moved in and revitalized Eastern Avenue, built restaurants, built housing, built all sorts of businesses, and really brought this renaissance into our city. I mean, I just think part of why I love to get to represent Southeast Baltimore is it is the most vibrant part of our city. No offense, Odette or Franca, but right, you can walk up Eastern Ave and hear 8 different languages being spoken and eat ethnic food from 12 different countries across the globe. I mean, that is what makes a city so great, right? Is the ethnic diversity, is the vibrance. Franca mentioned earlier, the only growing population in our school system is our immigrant population, right? That is really important in terms of how funding is allocated. And so the rhetoric that President Trump deploys around the need for safety, public safety from the immigrants that are coming to get us and take our jobs could not be further from what we see on the ground in Southeast Baltimore. And Angelo, like, no one does a better job than you in reminding us just how much this community has to offer in terms of its vibrance, its spirit, the joy, the parades. So I thank you for that. But again, I think that it is so important for my colleagues on the city council, and this is what I've tried to stress in my 4 years, to recognize that our diversity is our greatest strength. And it's not just Black and white, it is Black, brown, white, all the different colors that make our city great. And so, again, when we see ICE come and really terrorize our communities, what's been so heartening to me is to see how we've all banded together, white and Black and brown, all of us, to say, not acceptable. We don't want you in here. We don't want you messing up the lives of people. And you are actually doing more to harm public safety than anyone else is, because you're creating mass fear and you're harming the education of our children. Because there was a period where kids wouldn't go to school because they were so afraid after that dad got picked up outside Hampstead Hill Academy. And so, again, what I've tried to stress, what I know that my colleagues have started to come to understand, is that Baltimore is great because of its diversity, because of its Hispanic and other immigrant communities, and that's what is going to carry us into this future. It is going to be mixed. It is going to be all different languages, and it is going to be beautiful. And I just love to get to be part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add something, Councilman. I'm looking forward to also serving with you because there's so much to do. And of course, your expertise on a lot of the education issues is going to be important. But I dream of Green Mountain Avenue looking like like Eastern Avenue, frankly. Like, I think Green Mountain Avenue could just be another place where we have, international, I mean, I'm working really hard to get Green Mountain Avenue to be that way too. And that is amazing. And people love it. They're like, oh yeah, we'd love to have Ethiopian here. Oh yeah, we'd love to have taco shop here. Oh yeah, we'd like to have. So I mean, I think so many people are starting to think about, well, how that they actually want a diverse city, because it's super boring without it, frankly. but also that the example that you have set, frankly, in your district, I think is something that we can emulate all over in all of our districts as well, because all of our districts are becoming more diverse, frankly. You know, so I think that all of our colleagues are going to be looking to you, to me, to others as to, you know, how do we make that work? You know, solve any conflicts that might come up or whatever, because I think that will strengthen how they do their work, but also how our communities look and draw in more people, and people will love to come here. So I think that there's already so much groundwork that you've already laid, Councilman, to make some of that happen.
Thank you. And I do also briefly want to thank Delegate Pena Melnick for her hard work on the DREAM Act, as well as the Trust Act. I was able to come and testify, I think, in the Senate, and it is just so logical and such a no-brainer that we should be a state that is welcoming and that does no harm to our immigrant brothers, sisters, and siblings. And so my sincere hope is that maybe this session, but at least once we have a new governor, that we're able to get the Trust Act in Maryland. And again, I'm a big fan and supporter, and I thank Delegate Pena Melnick for her exceptional hard work.
Thank you. I'm hoping, thank you so much. And thank you for your support, because we can do it by ourselves, right? I think just like your 5 fingers, you know, you need them all for your hand to function. That's how society is, the diversity, the inclusion, all of us. It passed the House. As you know, the problem has been the Senate. We have a new Senate president. We have a new chair of the JPR committee, someone more progressive. So I am hoping that, you know, we can get it through. If we get it through this coming session, you know, the governor is going to veto it. So more likely than not, you're right, it will probably be when we get a new governor, which is so important, someone that is humane and kind and has apathy for everyone. There's someone that believes that we are one Maryland, okay? And that you're not gonna think of party lines, and that you speak not from both sides of your mouth, that you would truly treat every human being in Maryland with respect. And that is so important, regardless of what party you belong to, is to have a leader that has apathy, that can bring people together, which we're lacking in this country, right? And we need someone that can relate. So I will continue to fight. It is important. You know, you can't be elected just to warm the seat. It is too much work. You know, it's a huge, I wouldn't say sacrifice, because if you love it, it's not a sacrifice, but it's a huge endeavor. It is a lot of work from you, from your families, to run for office. You put yourself out there, you expose yourself out there, you know, and if you're there, then why just warm the seat? You know, I don't say fight for everything. You pick your battles and you do it intelligently, and you try to build coalitions. And this is an issue where people get it, you know, that we are growing and that we are an asset to this community. So I thank you for having such a beautiful heart, for embracing our community, for being not just embracing it, but for going the extra mile and being a voice, because it's important. Odette and I and Franca can't just be out there by ourselves, you know, with the Latino issues all the time, right? Because you get pigeonholed. You need to bring people to the table and have other people be the voice as well, right? I mean, I'm often in meetings where I'm thinking, do you translate? How many Latinos do you have? How does your website look? And then I'll do in the chat, I'll send a friend a question. I say, can you ask that question? You know, because I have asked it 100 times. Can you now ask the question? So I am grateful for your advocacy. And I am in your district often. I have gone to a lot of restaurants to eat. So I love Baltimore City.
And I just want to uplift the work of organizers that have been coming together, especially after the horrific death of Freddie Gray 5 years ago. There's been amazing unity and solidarity of groups coming together. The campaign for safety, housing, and jobs that's been doing a lot of this work to unify. Uh, Organizing Black, Casa de Maryland, so many organizations that have seen how important it is for us to really be there and be raising up the needs of one another, so that it is all of us together saying, yes, like we need access to make sure that everyone can understand literally in their language what's happening in these meetings, where these huge decisions are being made, and making sure that we are really looking out for each other and our neighbors. And there's just some basic things that we need to be able to. There's so much survival that happens in our city, and I think many of us are ready to start thriving. And we can do that as long as we are really unified and working together and seeing the humanity of one another. And I think that the allyship, Zeke, that you've shown the community is a huge part of that. And so thank you so much for your dedication to really lifting up the needs of all aspects of the community. And that's how we're going to really make the progressive changes that are needed, so that even when we have, someone as awful and cruel in the presidency, we can do the work that we need to on the ground to make sure that we're looking out for our community. But to turn it back to, the message of today, we have to get out there. We have to vote. We have to make sure we are mobilizing and organizing and doing everything we need to, so that we can have a change in who is representing us from the level of the presidency and down to the governor, because these policies are not just things that are cumbersome. They are things that affect people's lives. These are life or death issues. These are issues that rip families away through ridiculous arrests and over policing of our communities, and through the awful deportation system that is tearing apart families. And we need to have and embrace more humanity in our politics. And I'm excited about all of you for all the work that you've been doing and will continue to do to make sure that we're really fighting for working families across Maryland.
I have a question for Jocelyn. Have you seen across the Maryland what is happening in Baltimore City in reference to the Latino participation in the political system? I mean, what is happening in Baltimore City is a historic moment. The first time in the history where we have one Latina and possible two Latinas elected in city council. Is you that work at the state level, are you seeing any changes in the other parts of Maryland that might be doing what is happening in Baltimore City, or something similar?
Yeah, well, we have, and I congratulate you, because you're doing a lot that I think that we should be doing at the state level, right? You have an Office of Immigrant Affairs, and we should have an Office of Immigrant Affairs at the state level. It should be a cabinet position as well, right? In Montgomery County, they have Councilwoman Nancy Navarro and Councilman Gabriel Albornoz, who are both Latinos, and they're both on the council as well. In Prince George's, we have Denny Taveras, who's the only Latina out of 11, 9 elected by district and 2 at large. We have some local, like Mayor Rocio Trevino and some others, but we don't have the numbers that we should. And I would say I'm very impressed by Baltimore City's organization with the Latino community, with, having yourself, Angelo, having a president from Casa, Esperanza Center, Centro Sol. I mean, you guys are just impressive. And I hope that we replicate that elsewhere. And I think that you're going to see more of that, because we need to be present. It is important for us to consider running for office. It is important for us to be on boards, not just running for office. A lot of these local boards, like in Maryland, we have all these boards, that, you know, the decisions and policies are made. We have to make sure we look at the boards at the state level, at local level, make sure that we are represented, because that's where the decisions are made. Make sure that we have teachers and principals that are Latinos as well. There's schools that the majority are Latinos. In my district, 70, 80%, yet less than 1% of the principals are Latino. Less than 2% of the teachers are Latino. There's no excuse. It's really, when you look at the healthcare community, look at doctors and nurses, it's the same thing. There's no reason why we can't be more diverse. It is a matter of making a decision, making it a priority to fight for that, and to make sure that you work towards that, because it is attainable. But you are an example. You truly are doing an amazing job.
And I think more important than ever to get involved politically, to educate our community about the importance of voting, and ask elected officials to do their work and to make sure that they represent all the communities. It makes no sense that you have schools where 89, 90% of the students are Latino students, and you have less than 1% of Latino teachers. It really makes no sense. I'm like, when I hear that, it really gets to me like, how is that possible? That we can say as a nation that we are a nation of justice and equality for all, and we can take a look at the school systems, for example, and see what we're seeing, and just is boggling. But again, I think that we are all doing tremendous work, and it is important that we continue doing this work and educating our communities to get involved. That's why I've been doing this work for 25 years, and God willing, I will continue to do this work, to create changes, and to really, I'm so excited to see what's happening right now, and to move forward. But again, having representation is the only way, I believe, that we will create changes. Having people like Jocelyn in the Maryland House really talking about the Latino community. And I know what it's like to be the only one. And I know what it's like when people look at you and say, oh no, here we go again. You know what I mean? And they turn their ears off, and they don't really want to hear what you have to say. And you are just getting pissed off and mad and say, God, this is what's going on in my community. So I've been there and I get it. And I think that we need to continue our fight, because we are making a difference because we see the importance of having representation. Because if we ignore something, the problem does not go away. What is happening right now is in this nation is, for a very long time, very serious issues have been ignored. Now, the pressure cooker just went off. Now we got all these issues that we got to deal with. And I've always said that many of the issues that the African American community is experiencing right now, the Latino community will experience the same issues in another 10, 15 years, because we are experiencing similar issues of where we are not represented, where we don't count, where our voices are not heard, where decisions are making by people who are not impacted, but what we are impacted for. And
But I have to tell you, when you look at COVID-19,
yeah.
the Maryland has 24 counties, right, in Baltimore City. The county with the largest number of COVID-19 cases, more than 28,000, is Prince George's County, right? Which is followed by Montgomery County, by Baltimore County, by Anne Arundel, and then Baltimore City, top 5, right? So the zip code in Prince George's County, the people that live in Prince George's, which I live in Prince George's, we are people of color. The zip code in the entire state of Maryland, which has 6 million people, with the highest number of COVID-19 cases, is 20783, which is the Langley Park, Hyattsville, right? Adelphi community. Chilham is the Latino community, the immigrant community, has over 2,880 COVID-19 cases. So when you say our issues, I will even say that our issues are the same.
Yeah.
You look at health disparities when it comes to education, when it comes to health, environmental, all those social determinants of health, not just having access to healthcare, but where you live, how much you make, being an essential worker, taking public transportation, they affect us, Black and brown people. You know, so this is the time for us to work together, to have one voice, because our issues are the same, because together we are powerful and we can get it done. And this is the time to act. So when we go back to the General Assembly in January, we must put in bills to deal with the health disparities. And they often have a big fiscal note, Angelo. But you know what? That's BS. You either pay now or you pay later. This is the time to get it done. When you look at implicit bias, okay, all those issues that our community, you know, the workforce not having representation, this is the time. And I feel it. I feel like we are going to do it and we must work together. It's important.
Agree.
Thank you so much for that. I completely agree. And so just to close us out, I wanted to invite everyone to kind of go around and share any closing thoughts. And I think to kind of echo a lot of the sentiment that has been brought up, maybe we can highlight one, an issue that is going on within the communities that you respectively represent, and maybe an organization that's working on that, trying to take on the collective approach. And so maybe in our closings, we can kind of highlight that, and then someone who's working on it, and any other things that you think are relevant to getting Latino people out to the polls and kind of getting information into making it accessible to folks. If anyone would like to start, if not, I can. I know, Franca, you said you have to leave early for something, so maybe if you want to go first, and if you have to leave, we completely understand.
Great, thank you. Yes, so something that's a huge issue in the community in which I'm running is the issue of food access. There is a tremendous amount of food apartheid across Baltimore City and very concentrated within this district. And so, you know, food apartheid being the lack of access to healthy food, a lack of food sovereignty, which is your own independence and ability to be able to get access to that food. Recently, there's a supermarket that has closed down in a neighborhood where now, without that supermarket, there is really nothing for many blocks, meaning that now residents are going to have to spend essentially an entire day if they take public transportation to try to get food to their homes. And so this is a tremendous issue. When you live far from healthy food access, there are certain comorbidities, right? Which is one, an increase in the amount of diabetes, an increase in heart conditions. And so, you know, we absolutely struggle with crime in our city. And I also think it's important to think about the crime that is committed when we don't have the kind of development that allows for our community members to be able to eat healthy. Because that is causing deaths as well. And we know that in this time of COVID, having diabetes, having a heart condition makes you more vulnerable. And that's the case with any kind of disease that may be prevalent that someone has to endure and confront. And so that's something that there are incredible examples. Lucky we are in Baltimore, and there are people that are doing amazing work when it comes to food access. So I want to highlight the work that's being done in Cherry Hill through the Black Yield Institute. And if you haven't visited them, I really recommend checking out the website, Black Yield Institute, looking at their social media and seeing the amazing work that they've done with urban gardening, working on opening up a co-op market. They do also pop-up markets to even bring food further into the community. So really taking on how to solve this together, and it being a means to create jobs within the community, to create an opportunity for urban farmers to be able to sell their produce. You know, so this is not just about simply getting access to the food, but it's also about making sure that this is about creating food independence, opportunity for Baltimore's vibrant entrepreneurs And so, that is how I think we begin to solve these issues, is really looking at these incredible organizations that are really listening to what's happening in the city. Something else that Black Yield does is incorporating teaching urban farming with mentorship. So there's so much incredible work that is being done that we can learn from and really try to expand across the city so that we can have the healthy food that all of us deserve to have access to. So that's something that's just really resonating here in District 12. And I hope we can work to remedy that and really center community leaders and community members in solving these issues. And I'll just close with this, that we need to do a better job of trusting our community to solve community problems. Something that I mentioned earlier is the Baltimore English Spanish Intercambio. We gave young people a problem, which was illiteracy, and they figured out an incredible, innovative way to solve that problem. That included childcare, that included youth programming, so that parents could be able to be there and get the lessons that they needed to learn English so they could communicate with their schools. So I think when we trust our community to solve problems, you're going to get solutions that are really about looking at all the nuances that are experienced in our community and really empower our community members as leaders. And that's the work that I think needs to be done to address the issues that, are impacting us as a city.
Okay.
But thank you so much. It's been such an honor to be a part of this conversation. I actually have to go to a food distribution location. So thank you all so much. And it's been a real honor to be in this conversation with you all. And Angelo, thank you also for organizing this and the incredible work that you've been doing to uplift our community. I can't wait for tomorrow in La Caravana. So excited to see you all. So be there 2 p.m. tomorrow. It's going to be a great event and just show the beauty and diversity of our magnificent community. So come check it out. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Just to follow up with the caravan, I believe the biggest issue that we have in Baltimore City is the lack of representation in city government and city agencies, period. What I've done for many years is advocating for the Latino community and fought many fights and many wars. And I left for a while, and then I came back and I started a nonprofit, which is Nuestras Raíces Inc., which what I'm trying to do is empower our community to believe in themselves by bringing them together through the culture and their heritage, which is a very strong part of who we really are. And to use that to showcase the livelihood, the richness, and the diversity of the community. The caravan tomorrow is not just a caravan. It's really much more than that. Last year we did it, and it was a festival and a parade. It was great, but it was a message to Baltimore that we are here. Look at us. We are very diverse. We are from many different places. We are Americans. We are Peruvians and Colombians and Puerto Ricans and all of that, Dominicans, all of that. And empowering the community to come out and to be honored of who they are and not to be afraid, and to feel part of the city and to feel comfortable to come out and say, oh, I can actually be Latino and be proud of being Latino. And bringing all this, the Latino community is a very diverse community. We have people from 25 different nations with different cultures and different foods and sometimes even languages and stuff. And to bring all of that together for a common goal is a job of itself. But I think that, again, pushing city government and city agencies to change, pushing and supporting Latino candidates and candidates that are pro-Latino is part of our mission as an organization. Even though we are a cultural organization, but myself, I'm an advocate. I've been an advocate for 25 years, and you can't stop being an advocate after you start a nonprofit and do this. But I believe that we are advocating through culture, and it's something very different that I think it hasn't really been seen before. It makes people wonder what's going on. So for some people may think, oh yeah, the Latinos are getting together and just having fun and whatever. It's really a whole lot more than that. And we are inviting the American community to come in and feel part of this and get a little flavor of what it is, the Latino community, not just all Mexicans, not all just illegal aliens, not all undocumented aliens, not just people who don't speak English or whatever the story is, not criminals, not rapists, but just people who live in this city, who are making a contribution, who want the same thing that all of us want. We all want the same thing. We all have families. We all got to go to work and pay our bills and hopefully trying to get a better life and so forth. And that's what we are trying to do. So we will continue our work, and with the support of all of you, obviously, because it's teamwork. Really, one person cannot do this alone, and it really takes all of us to move forward. So I'm like really pretty happy and thankful that this is happening, and look forward to continue this journey with your support. Yeah. Next.
I want to thank you again and for allowing me to be part of this wonderful panel. I think everyone has such a beautiful heart. I leave inspired. It's wonderful to know that people care, especially during these difficult times. I myself do a lot of work with many organizations, but one of them, which is dear to my heart, is Casa de Maryland. And as someone who is on the health committee, our goal is to make sure that people have, health insurance, right? Unfortunately for the undocumented community, the state and the federal government do not do much because you have to be here, have legal presence. However, CASA has a health line, and that they have connections with different hospitals. But I want to remind people that regardless whether you have insurance or not, if you do not have insurance, if you are undocumented, I meant to say regardless whether you're here legal or not, every hospital in the state of Maryland, we passed a bill that requires that they provide charity care. So when you're in the hospital and you can't pay for your bill, make sure that you apply for charity care. They must, take your application, screen it. And if you can't pay, okay, you won't have to pay, but you have to apply. Okay. In addition, for the undocumented community, there's also emergency Medicaid, which they don't want us to know, but there are instances that I've been able to help, for example, with a kidney transplant, to make sure that it was paid for an undocumented individual, because there is emergency Medicaid available. You can apply otherwise for Medicaid if you're here, if you're not here with proper documentation legally. But if you are undocumented, there is emergency Medicaid. There's also help through the hospital financial assistance. So there are there is a lot of help out there. There are a lot of organizations. And lastly, if you have any questions about anything, you can call 211. And 211 is a number in Maryland that applies for all 24 counties. They have counselors there. You tell them the problem, whether it's housing, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's health, education. They're able to connect you with someone in the community. Thank you so much again for the work you do.
Thank you so much for us today.
So I would point to the digital divide, which remains a profound problem in Baltimore and a lot of parts of our state. In the city, pre-COVID in 2018, 40% of our households did not have home wireline internet access. And that was a major problem then. It is a crisis right now. And to be clear, that 40% is heavily Black and brown folks. And if you look at some of the redlining maps of our city from the 1930s and 40s, it tracks remarkably with who does and does not have access to home internet. So this issue about being able to do panels like this one and participate politically for seniors being able to stay connected when you're being asked to isolate and socially distance. And then for our children who school is all online right now. And so if you don't have a digital device and decent internet access, you can't learn. You are quite literally being cheated out of your right to a public education, which is in our state's constitution, that all children are supposed to get an adequate education. And that's not reality for too many of our kids. So there's been an enormous amount of organizing work. I'm sorry she's not still on the Zoom, but Franca's students from Somos have really been leading this fight, not just locally, but nationally. They built a coalition with folks in Denver, Detroit, Philadelphia, all across the country to say that what the FCC has done has not been good enough, what Congress has done has not been good enough, and what large internet service providers like Comcast, which holds an exclusive franchise agreement with the city of Baltimore, have done is not enough. And that every single child in our city deserves to be online and at speeds where it's good enough that it doesn't crash every time they try to learn on Google Classrooms or on Zoom. That's what they've been pushing, demanding, fighting for. They were able to get us, the city council. I was proud to sponsor a bill to move $3 million from our youth fund to immediately purchase about 15,000 Chromebooks for kids across Baltimore. But that is the digital divide is an issue that hits our Hispanic immigrant community particularly hard. And I'm proud to say that a lot of the leadership in solving it has come from Hispanic students from Somos. And again, thank you so much for having me on this panel. It has been truly, truly, truly a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all. And I can't wait for tomorrow.
Mhm.
Picking up on what the councilman said, I have a couple of schools in my district that are still waiting for Chromebooks. And we're in getting on week 4 of school. And there are parents who are taking their children to work because the employer has not given them a chance to have a few days off just to help with school. There's a young man in my daughter's class who is at work with his, with his mom. And so you hear the background noise, right? So this issue of the digital divide is so multifaceted because it's the internet access, which by the way, someone came to me today and said, well, why can't we have the cheese buses, the yellow buses with internet access and park them in certain areas so that people can get it? So that's, people are coming up with ideas because we need to be innovative. And the students from Somos are so inspiring in that regard. But the problem isn't done. We still have this issue of employers not being very flexible at all with the parents to be able to have the child learn. We still have a very, very severe problem with, kids not even logging on, whether or not they don't have a computer or whether the kid's not there or the parents aren't there or something. So this is going to really expand the educational disparities that we have in our city. And in my district is an interesting district. I have some of the most wealthiest people in the city, and I have some of the economically challenged in our city, or in my district. And so it's really an opportunity to bring people together in a way that they haven't been before. I mean, I have several people in my district who've said, how can I help? I don't want to just help with my charitable dollars. I want to actually be there, do something. And we need to capitalize on that excitement and figure out ways that we can bring people together. And I think that's part of our role as council people. Our role as council people is certainly to do the constituent service, to advocate for our communities, to make sure we're putting in good legislation to help our city, but also to bring communities together that typically don't work together. And so I'm working on ways to be able to do that. And it's interesting, I think, because I'm Latina and not identified as white or black, but right in the middle, people are like, oh yeah, let's do this, So it's an interesting position that I'm able to have and maybe be a model for other districts. I also have 5 business districts in my district, some that are struggling, but some that are really thriving. I have Hamden on the Avenue. I have Remington in our house. And so when we talk about small business, with the experience that I have with the chamber, but also working with the 5 areas to try to make sure that Amazon doesn't win the holidays. All right. We want people to be able to go local, to support our local business, because it's going to be our local businesses, frankly, that are going to get us out of this. In addition to our health institutions, because we have the highest employment with our health institution, but we've got to be able to make sure that our small businesses thrive. And I know that our colleagues in the council are in the same boat in terms of how do we think about making sure that our businesses are thriving to be able to create jobs. So I think that there's so many, I mean, you've just seen here where we've made all kinds of connections about how we can work together on various issues, and that a lot of issues in our districts are very similar. And that it's certainly the Latino and Hispanic population have specific issues, but a lot of them are the same as others. And so working together is going to be important. But we really have one job to do in November, and that's to get this guy out of the White House, okay, and to elect people across the board that are going to help all of us, and not just 1 or 2 people. And that's really important as we think about the best way to get people out to vote, and the importance of this election. And again, at the national level and all the way down, the Senate, we got to flip the Senate. There's no other choice there. We have to flip the Senate. It's probably as important as the presidential race. And so working to, the Democratic Party, Delegate Peña just talked about, you can call into Pennsylvania, you can call into Virginia, you can call into South Carolina, to be able to do that. If you think Maryland's going to be safe, then, do that. So there's lots of ways to get involved in the next, 30 something days on the election. But then after that, let's get together and figure out how, we've got a lot of ideas that we just talked about today. We've got a lot of issues to work on, and we want to work on them together. And so I'm super excited to work with my colleagues, Councilman Cohen and all of my colleagues on the council to really do some incredible work. I mean, we have the potential to do some really incredible work. And the other thing is that in 2 years, we're likely to get the power to do more with the budget. And that is really critical, to be able to think about what are the priorities in our communities and how do we hold our agencies accountable using the budget, but also making sure that all of our priorities, because a budget is a values document, to make sure that keeps going, but also making sure that we're addressing some of the real issues in our city. So I'm super excited about the opportunity. And so I just want to thank all of you for taking the time this afternoon, 2 hours on a Saturday. That's a lot of time, but it's valuable time that I think we probably needed anyway. Do you know what I mean? So to come together. And I'm excited about all the events that are coming up to honor and celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. We have the Caravana tomorrow, which is going to be really fun. And also on Wednesday evening, I'm having a town hall lifting up Latinas in our community. On Thursday, there will be a panel that Delegate Peña put together for the Democratic Party. And there's going to be a ton more. There's the Latino Providers Network is having their meeting and so many other things. So it's really important. The other role that I feel like I'm able to play is to educate Baltimore about the Latino community, because we don't know. And so I also take that role very seriously and look forward to working with all of you. So thanks so much for your time. And thank you, Angelo, for your commitment to this work, and also for bringing us together. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for making the time to be with us and to really share from your heart. I think that it's so important to build these relationships with our elected officials. And that's really, kind of like what we've echoed is that's how we're going to get things done, is working together, whether that's just interpersonal or between, different communities. I think that's going to be our route forward. And with so many engage opportunities for engagement, I hope this isn't the last time that we share space together in this way, and I hope that we can have more of these conversations to shed some light on a lot of the people who are out in the streets and in offices and at the food drives, really doing the work on the ground and amplifying that work, so that we can really find some solutions together so that we can get into that thrive mode instead of being in survival mode for so long. And so I just really, really appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. And I wanted to hand it off to Angelo if you want to close us out with any thoughts or.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your time to do this. I think it was very beneficial for all of us to hear each other and to share each other's hopes and passion, because this is about passion. We don't do this because of the money. You know,
Right.
No.
we are who we are. We love what we do. People said to me, you making money in the caravan? And when I tell them that I don't get paid, I don't get any money, like, well, why are you doing this? And it is because we love what we do, is our passion. And thank you. I know all of you are really busy, and thank you for taking the time out to have this conversation. I think it was a very good conversation. Hopefully other people can see this and see the work that has been doing in Baltimore, and hopefully others in other areas can sort of look at this and say, why can't we do the same thing, and hopefully grow this to other people, because I think that's what really is going to take place. I want to thank Roots and Raíces as well, and Baltimore Boats for making this happen. And again, this is all coming together. This is not just me or just anybody else. It really takes a team effort to do this, and that's what really works. And I'm just very thankful and grateful to everyone and for making this happen, and looking forward to a great day tomorrow, and whatever comes after that, because tomorrow is only tomorrow, and then the next day is more work and more conversations and more issues, and life goes on. But tomorrow we'll take a break and just enjoy ourselves and celebrate who we are and where we come from. And last year, the best thing about the parade last year was seeing people happy. People were happy. People were smiling. I mean, I saw Sid Cohen hugging people and kissing people. I'm like, what is wrong with him? He's like a Latino. He was just like all over the place. And he came and hugged me. Angelo, this is beautiful. This is great. And he just like, I was back. Kid on the candy store. I just love it. And I look at Latinos' faces, and everybody was just happy. And it was just like, it was a great thing. And I'm looking forward to do that. And again, I can't say thank you enough to everyone. Thank you to Corey for doing this, and it really makes a difference. And look forward to the next chapter of this journey. Thank you all, and try to enjoy the weekend. Thank you.
Have a blessed one. Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Corey. Bye, Odette.
Take
Bye,
care.
Steve.
Excellent work.
Bye, Jocelyn.
Cuídate. Gracias.
Hablamos. Bye-bye.
Gracias.